When I was a little boy, there were about 5 grocery stores here. How they all survived, I don't know, but they did. Everybody did business with one or the other. Well, Dinky Davis had a bicycle. Dinky was a kind, simple-minded fellow. I never knew him to harm a soul. If he saw you as a child, he'd say, "Want a ride?" And he'd put you in his basket and give you a ride. If he brought groceries to your mama, he would give you a ride before he left. I know Dinky's brother and his wife. They're both gone now, but good people. You could say a lot of nice things about him, but Dinky had a heart of gold. And I've seen a guy working up in Michigan with the automotive business down here for picnic in the park celebration, dragging his wife over, saying, "I rode in that basket. He came to Mount Hope on his bike, and that's where we lived, and they gave me a ride." And that's just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. So we got that bike. I was at home, I guess, and the phone rings, and it's Jenny Fight. Has lived down here in Courtland until just recently. And she was up there because her husband is a big gun man. And he was up there at a flea market that had some real good guns. And Jenny was just wandering around. She said she turned a corner, and there was something about like the roving bicyclist or something. But Jenny knew it as that guy on a bike that when her daddy would visit home, she would get to ride in the basket. So immediately told the story. So people still today, if you tell them the Dinky Davis story, they know who you're talking about real quick. And the story goes, I told you Jenny Gilchrist and Bill were in Nashville at a gun fair, and just a flea market really, and told us about it. Well, we found out that a lady from Connecticut, world makes strange bedfellows, married a boy from Athens, and he got tired of Connecticut, so they moved back to Athens. And she had started an antique place, because when you're in Connecticut, you can say, "I'm Southern and I get these from down the home," and Yankees will flock to it. But anyway, Jenny called me in the middle of the day, and she said, "You won't believe what I'm looking at. Dinky Davis's bicycle." I said, "What do you think?" She said, "It's real." And of course, Jenny had seen it and ridden in the basket like so many of us had. So I said, how do we find it? "Oh, they live in Athens." I said, "Hot dog, get a name and phone number." Well, I called them up, and they said, yeah, they divorced, and I'm not sure just what the circumstances all were. But so anyway, I'm gonna go over there. Well, Jenny, I think, went with me, if I remember correctly. But somebody, Bobby Lane, one of the Lane girls, they have their home down on the river. This is the oldest one. Is married and married to Bucky Patton over there, and so they show up. Bobby does, and together we negotiated with that gal. And I came back to the Historical Association, walked in, and I said, "I found it. It's real. It's in good shape." And Bobby Patton and I looked at it, and da-da-da-da-da. "How much do they want for it?" I said, "Well, that's the problem. It's in horrible shape. It's not really worth what she wants, but she's got it, and we don't." And so right there, we got pledges of enough money that we made her an offer that she accepted, and we got it. But we paid a sinful amount of money for it.
Do you remember how much the amount was?
Well, she was wanting $900 to start with, but we got her down a little bit. This is a copy of a uniform, and I'm told that when the 70 or so Courtland folks volunteered to go out to Texas and fight for their independence, when they got on the train to leave here, they were decked out in that. Now, I'm not sure my wife could pay me enough money or do me enough sweetie stuff to get me in that, but they say they did, and away they go. Well, there were about 70 some. I've seen anywhere from 70 to 73 or 4 that went. Only 7 came back. It was that bloody war. There was a known battle near Goliad, Texas. We didn't do too well as the new American nation, and so they had a bunch of folks in prison. 7 or 8 of our guys were in the prison. It varies. We had 2 guys in that 70 were doctors. So the Mexicans, as soon as they got them, and I'm not going to try to get into all those stories, but they put them in there helping with the wounded. Well, they told the Americans, come on, we're going to turn you loose today, and they took them out and shot them all, except a few got away. And they came on home. Well, we've got all sorts of details, memorabilia, Goliad. Courtland has done some sister city things with Goliad. We've gone there, they've come here. I have not been to Goliad. I've got a brother in Austin, so it's on my list. It's not easy to get from Austin to Goliad. The roads don't go from there to there. But again, that was another significant happening in Courtland. And I understand there's a story here, and I'm not going to try to get the guy's name straight, but 2 gentlemen farmers here in Courtland were riding around in a buggy, looking over the new crops planted, and they see this guy in a suit and overcoat. Doesn't fit Courtland. Who is he? He's not one of us. Ask him who he is. He said, oh, I'm surveying where we're going to put an airport. They said, no, that's my cotton field. Said, sir, you do not know who I am, so you'd best cut the lip, because that's going to be our airport. And so we built a World War II airport out there and did it in record time. We've got a section back here that goes through that. We've got all sorts of pictures of planes that were of that vintage, uniforms. We've got timesheets. You could spend a day back here if you like that. I grew up at a time when we did a lot of interesting things out there, some of them after hours. Who used to have Saunders Castle. Now, some of y'all probably didn't get to see Saunders Castle, but it was quite the place. When I was a teenager doing stuff I shouldn't do, got a lot of stuff here on it. You can go to school on it. We used to go out there with whoever was 16 would take everybody else out there, and we'd climb around at night. Dangerous as all get out, but you know what 12 and 13-year-olds do. And it's a beautiful place. We've got an actual photograph of it. We've got a sketch of it. Here's some more. If you stop and see that, you'll say, wait a minute. They're not looking toward the highway because the train was a mode of transportation back then. They're looking toward the train. What you did, if you and look through Courtland, my granddaddy built a house for his 2 old maid sisters, and they lived just up here. Behind the Champion building, across the tracks, and their house faced it. Well, when I was going through closing homes up as people died, I found a picture of that house, and I found a engineering sketch of it, and I couldn't figure out what that was for the longest. And somebody, Roger McNeese, told me, he said, no, you saw that house. I said, really? He said, yes. It burned down in 1957. Well, I was 13 then. So I saw it, but my brain wasn't working then to remember all this stuff. So anyways, there's just all sorts of stuff around us. It's history. Why? Because it's old and nobody really knows about it, and they learn so much from it or something. But what we've hit is the 4 biggest things. That doesn't mean, remember, you're going to find that little pencil bomb, and it'll be different, but in every museum you go to, you're going to find a story like that you can make good of. I could take you all day and go through here and see things that I haven't seen in a while. Now, this bird dog field trials, that's a big front page of the newspaper. Now, some of us know, some of us don't. This was Jean Weaver. Her daughter's Edith, who's deceased, Lane, who lives in Cape Cod, and Will, who's deceased. This is W.D. Gilchrist, and he actually owned the house up there. And because when Edith and I were freshmen in college, her mother died, her father was already dead, so these girls were orphaned. And Anne Lane McWhirter Lane's a Courtland name, McWhirter's a Courtland name, took those girls in and let them live with her and her husband, who was Roger McWhirter, not the one we knew, but his grandfather, until they got on their own and had something to do. But this is a story about the field trials, and that used to be quite the thing. In January, they'd have field trials here, last all week, start on Monday and last until Friday probably. I was too young to keep up with the calendar then, but I'd enjoy the party on Friday night. Would be up there at the Grove, as it was called, across from the school, and it was quite an affair, and people would come from all over the South, even occasionally a northern state, have a bird dog and want to run him and get trophies and what have you, and we've got some trophies around here for it. This is a picture of
whose land did they do the trials on?
Everybody's. The fences were much less common then, but you'd have a big flat wagon with all sorts of dog things in it. You'd load up 6 or 8 dogs and go out and run the dogs, and then go back and get another load of dogs and just go on all day. And you had all sorts of categories. I was too young to understand it all, but we all get a day out of school, go, yeah, and that's a trophy from it. And the Weavers gave us most of these. I'm not sure who all, I have to look back, but this is now this is Eastern Field Trials, W.D. Gilchrist. I'm having trouble catching a name on it, but this was 1917, so that's a pretty old one. This signature board back here in the hallway, to me, that's the most important thing in this museum. Everything hits somebody. For a long time, Ted Letson said, "Hey, Sid, I got something I'd like to find a place to put." I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, I don't know. You know Stanley Crockett?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "He got a mind of his own." Well, he started with those insulation panels and started going around town and getting people to sign. And I can tell you, I can take you down, up and down that board, and when you see one lady, you see her 3 friends, because they came to town together and signed it. I saw my daddy's signature on there. I saw all my aunts, and just go on and on. It's just saw some of your relatives on there. I don't know exactly which ones, but it was all there. Well, my father died in 1952 when I was not yet 8. His name was on it, is on it. And so I said, "When did this happen, Ted? What date can we put on it?" Well, Ted said, "I don't know. I wasn't even born back then, this, that, and the other." But so I got to working. Well, Rudy was sitting here one day with, I don't know, 2 or 3 buddies, and they were just chewing the fat. And story came out that Benny Green was there, and he said, "Yeah, I just gotten out of the military, been off there in Korea fighting in the Korean War, and I came back." And he walked by with that signature board, and I signed it too. I said, "When did you get out of the military?" He said, "Oh, I got out in March of 52. I said, "Hot dog. Daddy died in August of 52, so I now know when that board got signed." And it's just amazing how things, is that significant? No, it's trivia. But it's what we live for and like to hear about. There's some old pictures of picnic in the park back in the early 60s that are around that can be used to tell stories about that area. Oh, someone pointed out the little wooden stand over there. Wayland Cross, most everybody that's from here knows him. He was one of Rudy's visitors and guests, and he was here one time, and he said something to me. He said, we were talking about cotton. He said, "I bet you don't know what your granddaddy used to sell that got me rich." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, my granddaddy and all those folks were growing a lot of cotton, and they had trouble with the boll weevil. And so they would take boys like me, and he was like 7'8". Waylon was always a stout, tall fellow, so he could do it. They would get that gizmo, put it over their shoulder, and walk, holding it so that the plants went through it, and their spring-loaded fingers there that would hit all the bowls. And if you had a bowl that was infested, had the boll weevil in it, it had already killed it, and it would drop off into your basket or your wire underneath. And then he would get so many, he said a penny a bowl. I don't know. Probably varied depending on how many boll weevils you had that year. But that was the boll weevil removal equipment back then. And so he said, yeah, said, your granddaddy sold them out of his store there. And of course I didn't know that. And so anyway, the next thing is he said, I got one in the barn. Would you like it? I said, let's go. So we went out there and got it and brought it here. I've never found a newer one or one in better shape. But that's just good old farm Yankee ingenuity. They had a problem with boll weevils, and so that spring-loaded thing. When I was young, it was not much was going on out there, but then when I started getting to be 10, 11, 12, they started having, the Sports Car Club of America had a chapter in Huntsville, and they would come down here to race because at that time there was not an abandoned air base of any significant size. It might have been a runway, but you know, ours has got also, you can lay out a track, pretty complicated or pretty simple. And of course, other things went on, unofficial gatherings at nights and weekends and what have you, but that was the official thing. And oh man, that would be great for 10 or 11, 12-year-old. If your mama would give you a couple of dollars and let you go out there, you could find the snack bars and just watch all the cars. And they were all the cars that you would call too little to be a sports car today and too cheap to, you know, they're not the $100,000 ones you can find everywhere. But that was for real. I don't know how many years. You know, when you're little, you think things last forever. It might have lasted for 6 or 8 years off and on, or it may have lasted longer, and I just didn't have the vision of length of time. Oh, the circus thing. Well, it seems that one day Mr. Hood got approached by a guy. He said, I've got a buddy that's been over here in Middle Mississippi doing a circus. Now, this was probably back 1870s, somewhere in that time frame. And I'd have to study on it some more. But anyway, Mr. Hood used that flat-bottom boat. Now, there were about 3 Mr. Hoods, and I'm talking about the one that lived in the 1870s and 80s. And he would go back and forth. Well, we didn't have a bridge for a vehicle to go across. You had to take a ferry. And there were lots of ferries, Brown's Ferry, Rhodes Ferry, you just name them as you go down the river. And so this guy gets in touch and says, will you take me across the river? Got a little circus. So they agreed on a price, and he gave Mr. Hood $100. Well, they take over most of the stuff. It wasn't a very big one. The boat was fairly big, but he had a couple of elephants. Well, they take one elephant over, and they chain his big old feet, hopefully to keep him from moving, so he'd just sit there. Well, the last elephant was going over, and Mr. Hood said, okay, I think it's time for you to give me the money now. He said, well, tell you what. He said, I've been on hard times, but I'm going to Columbia, Tennessee, and we're going to have one show enough for a big crowd, and I'll send you the money. Mr. Hood turned to the black man that was driving the boat for him, and he said, Ike, cut that elephant loose. Man said, what are you talking about? He can't swim. He said, that's your problem, not mine. Mine is $100 or whatever the rest of the money was. And that didn't last long before Mr. Hood got his money. And the elephant went on, and I don't know what happened in Columbia, whether it was a good show or not. But and everybody can tell stories like that.